We found out that Elijah Moore will not practice with those rib injury, the banged up ribs, but Greg Newsome will be going, again, coming off that groin injury. Scott, last year at the joint practices you started hearing stuff like, oh, the Dolphins looked sharper. You heard stuff coming out it was just like, oh, okay. If you start hearing things about, boy, the Browns' defensive line is loaded. Boy, this guy is a load. This guy is really. These are the kinds of things that usually you hear about good teams, is when joint practices are going on with really good teams.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And last year was, I didn't read too much into last year because you had all the Deshaun Watson stuff going on. I think the first day of the joint practices was when the suspension got announced, right? So there's a lot of distractions. You're making the switch to Jacoby Brissett. It was tough to get a great gauge, but you could see the Eagles win some of those one-on-one battles, right? You saw the talent of the Eagles come through and say, okay, this looks like a team that could make a jump this year, which obviously it did, going all the way to the Super Bowl. So I think what's going to be really valuable for the Browns, and you mentioned the defensive line, Philly's got a big-time offensive line. So how does this unit match up, right? How does Garrett – we talked about Garrett and Zadarius Smith and Dalvin Tomlinson and Obo, and Shelby Harris will probably get his first work, and Jordan Elliott, right? Like, all those guys up front, how do they match up against a big-time Philly front? Do they get stonewalled, or do they make enough plays, right? Like, is it 50-50? Because I think that's probably, ratio that you're looking for. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some against elite talent. And then the same goes for the other lines. With the Browns' offensive line, they should be really good. They got all 5 starters back. That Philly defensive front is a veteran group. It's been around. They have the big guys inside like Fletcher Cox. They have Brandon Graham on the outside. Hassan Reddick, right, who had a ton of sacks last year, just flies around the edge. How do Jed Wills and Jack Conklin hold up, right? I think that's a question because the Browns are relying so much on this line to be a strength. Well, you got to prove it against the best fronts in the league.
The other thing is the cornerbacks. When you think about A.J. Brown and some of the guys they're going to be going up against, those one-on-one matchups, you want to hear that the Browns are like you said, 50-50. Because, again, the Eagles are expected to be one of the top teams in the NFC.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You got Devontae Smith on the other side. Yeah, and then you can flip it, right? Elijah Moore has looked great against the Browns in practice. Does he look great against the Eagles? And I think there's reason to think he will, but it's another test for him and for everybody. David Njoku's had a great camp. Does that carry over when you're going against a solid Eagles defense? So I think individually and from a position group standpoint, there's going to be a lot of, it's probably a phrase used too much, but there's going to be a lot of measuring sticks in these next couple of days.